Well, if you've got any thoughts on Amendment 48 or the Second Amendment to the Constitution, we hope you'll come down here and share them with us. We'd like a wide variety of opinions at this each week. And who would like to go next? How about Keith?
Guess I'm the one. I'm next. That's it. As we get closer and closer to what some would say is the end of time as we know it, we have some very interesting things happening around us that I'm not sure everybody is aware of. You could say that we're living in very trying times. Right now we have economic turmoil going on in a way that we haven't seen since the 1930s. And one of the words that are used to describe this is greed. We also have other things going on. We're in a time where people are calling evil good. People are calling that which is dark light. People are calling that which is bitter sweet. It's a very confusing time that we're living in, and society as a whole seem to be oblivious to everything that's going on. And that's one of the reasons that a lot of this is happening, because people in general seem to be ignorant of what exactly is right and wrong. We have leadership and people vying to be leadership, people trying to get our vote who are muddying the waters, so to speak. We have a man running for president who says to determine when life begins is beyond his scale of pay. And this is a guy that wants to be the leader of the free world. And when they don't understand, and like the speaker before was talking about Amendment 48, was talking about the personhood amendment. And one of the reasons that, from my understanding, why we have an amendment is because people do not understand when human life begins. And like you heard her say, she used 3 different ways to define when that human life would begin. And we have to understand what it means exactly on this whole issue, because what we're talking about is the issue of abortion, which is a very hot topic coming up, and whether or not that's right and wrong, and when do you abort, when do you not abort, and when is a life worth keeping? Is it just because the father is a criminal, or is it because it's inconvenient to us as a society to have more children and we can't even deal with all the people? And on it goes. And what's happening is that we're getting leadership in office that are incapable of making decisions because they don't really know which way the wind is blowing. What's the popular wave that the people are thinking? And I think, well, we just better go with that because I want to get their votes. And instead of getting men and women in office that are capable of making decisions based upon their own values, based upon what we have commonly known as right and wrong. For example, back in the 60s when I was growing up, if somebody got divorced, it was like the ultimate shame. And it was a real embarrassment to our family. And then, 25 years later, when I get divorced, the law has already made, the state of Colorado had already made a law that said there's no fault divorce. And it made it really easy. And now all of a sudden, you don't have to have a legitimate reason to get divorced, and people are getting divorced as much as they're getting married. And the way we perceive life, the way we perceive what's right and what's wrong is changing with the whims of society.
Well, doesn't right and wrong just depend on the situation, though?
That's called situational ethics. And to answer that, I would say no, it does not depend upon the situation. There is a right and there is a wrong. And no matter what the situation is, it's always wrong to kill a person. But then that brings up capital punishment. And people who are against capital punishment say we decided we're not going to watch the time. Since I'm the last person, I'm going to take all the rest of the time. Oh, you going to speak? Oh, he's not going to speak. I'm last.
Oh, you're not going to do it?
So I challenge you this. If we're going to have capital punishment is a law that has really brought to light the absolute inadequacy of our leadership, because they disallowed nationally any prisoner to be put to death who's been on death row, because they thought that injecting a man wasn't a humane way to put a man to death. So everybody was shut off. And instead of the people coming up with leadership and the ability to make a decision that this man is on death row, we need to do him a favor and give him the death penalty. The penalty that by jury trial, by judge, by law that we have in our nation, we said he deserves death, and he sits there for 12 years on death row. That's just an example of the lack of leadership that we have. Next week, we'll have more examples. Thank you.
Well done.
All right, well, that's...
They're coming for us, John.
we're getting a little competition. I'll time out here just for a minute while that goes by. Well, we get all kinds of excitement down here at Civic Center Park. We got some sirens chasing in the background. But actually, the acoustics inside here are just wonderful. And I think that you can hear fine on the video, except when there's those kinds of sirens. And I thank you, everybody that came, not only the people that spoke here today, but the people that came and just listened in. You know, your being here in the audience really helps us out. And we hope maybe you'll come. Even if you don't have something you want to say next Sunday, just come down and listen in. Your being here helps out. Now, people are probably wondering, well, what does John think about this? And as far as Amendment 48, you know, it's hard to make a decision on some of these things because you hear different religious leaders and you get a variety of opinions, you know, with this idea of when does life begin. There was a Catholic priest and a Protestant minister and a Jewish rabbi talking about this, and the Catholic priest said, well, I'll tell you when life begins. It begins at conception. And the Protestant minister, from a fairly liberal tradition, or conservative, I'm not sure which it is really, but from one of the traditions, he says, well, we believe that conception, that life actually begins when the baby draws its first breath. And the Jewish rabbi from a very, very liberal church or temple, he said, well, you know what, I believe myself is, I believe life begins when the kids grow up and leave home and the dog dies. So we all think about these things in a little bit different way. And as far as being able to carry a sidearm, you know, I ran for office at one time, and they asked all the candidates, you know, do you own a gun or not? And I thought, well, do I own a gun? You know, what am I going to say about that? And the guy that was helping me in my campaign gave me the perfect answer. And it's really why this Second Amendment is so important, is we all have the right to bear arms. And he said, well, why don't you just say, assume that I do? Because if we assume the person has a weapon, then that gives us all the protection we need. And if we disarm everybody and nobody has their own personal protection, crime just naturally goes up, it seems to me. So anyway, these are a lot of things to think about. We'll be thinking about them here each Sunday afternoon, and I hope you will too. Join us down here at Civic Center Park, 4 o'clock each Sunday. And if you have a minute right now, if you liked what you saw here, why don't you just take a minute and forward this along to some of your friends that might like to come. They might be involved in politics. They've just gotten interested and involved this year. They have a candidate that they're supporting. If you'll take just a minute right now and forward this along to a few of your friends, it will really help us out. It'll help them out too. And you know what? It'll help you out, because if we don't protect our First Amendment rights, our society will suffer for it. So these kinds of exercises are important. And thank you for watching today. Hope to see you next week.